If you walk into a modern cannabis dispensary today, you will find a highly optimized, high-tech industry. There are electronic vaporizers, precise liquid drops, and customized strains engineered in laboratories to produce very specific biological effects. It feels like a completely modern phenomenon, but the relationship between humans and this controversial green leaf is ancient. In fact, cannabis was one of the very first crops our ancestors ever decided to cultivate, long before they even knew how to write. But they weren't always using it to get high. For thousands of years, cannabis was actually a remarkably boring agricultural staple. So, when did early humans transition from using this plant as a simple piece of rope to actively smoking it? The story begins in Central Asia, somewhere near modern-day Western China and Mongolia, around 12,000 years ago. As the last ice age was ending, humans were transitioning from nomadic hunter-gatherers to settled farmers, and they quickly realized that cannabis was essentially the Swiss Army knife of the plant world. But they weren't interested in the chemistry. They wanted the fiber. The stalks of the hemp plant are incredibly tough and fibrous, making them perfect for weaving. Our ancestors used it to make the world's first durable ropes, fishing nets, clothing, and sails. In ancient China, hemp was so fundamental to daily survival that it was considered one of the 5 major food and textile crops, alongside millet and rice. The seeds were ground into flour, and the oil was used for cooking. To an ancient farmer 10,000 years ago, cannabis wasn't a mind-altering substance. It was just the heavy-duty packaging material that held their civilization together. But wild cannabis back then was very different from the plants we have today. It contained almost no THC, the psychoactive compound that causes a high. In the wild, plants do not care about human entertainment. Cannabis originally evolved THC as a biological defense mechanism, acting as a natural sunscreen to protect its seeds from intense, high-altitude ultraviolet radiation, and as a bitter pesticide to keep insects from eating its leaves. At some point, however, a human somewhere threw a bundle of wild cannabis onto a campfire. Maybe they were clearing land, or maybe they were just using dried stalks to keep the fire going. But as the smoke filled the cave or shelter, they noticed something strange. The smoke didn't just sting their eyes, it changed the way they felt. They became relaxed, giggly, or deeply thoughtful. Once this discovery was made, human agricultural selection changed permanently. Farmers stopped breeding the plant just for long, straight fibers and started actively selecting the plants that produced the stickiest, most resinous, THC-heavy buds. We began guiding the plant's evolution to serve our minds, not just our ropes. For a long time, historians debated exactly when we started intentionally inhaling this smoke, but a major archaeological discovery provided a definitive answer. In the Pamir Mountains of western China, archaeologists excavated a 2,500-year-old cemetery called Jirzangkal. Inside the tombs, they found ancient wooden braziers, small wooden bowls used for burning incense or plants. When scientists analyzed the dark residue left on the inside of these bowls, they found a chemical signature of cannabis, with an extraordinarily high concentration of THC. To release this THC, the early humans had placed hot stones inside the wooden bowls, piled the cannabis leaves on top, and gathered around to inhale the heavy smoke during funeral rituals. This is the oldest direct chemical evidence of humans using cannabis, specifically for its psychoactive properties. Around the exact same time, on the other side of Asia, a Greek historian named Herodotus was taking notes on a nomadic group of horse riders called the Scythians. The Scythians were legendary warriors who roamed the vast Eurasian steppes, and according to Herodotus, they had a very specific post-war ritual. They would build small enclosed tents out of wooden poles and thick felt blankets. Inside the tent, they would place a bowl of red-hot stones. Then, they would crawl inside, throw cannabis seeds and leaves onto the glowing rocks, and seal the entrance. The tent would instantly fill with thick, heavy smoke. Herodotus wrote that the Scythians would inhale the smoke and howl with pleasure. It is the world's first recorded hotbox, happening over 2,400 years ago on the cold plains of Central Asia. As humans traveled, cannabis traveled with us. It spread along the Silk Road, carried by traders, soldiers, and spiritual seekers, adapting to every culture it encountered. It was utilized by spiritual leaders in ancient India, used as a painkiller in medieval Europe, and eventually transformed into the global industry we see today. We tend to view cannabis as a wild weed that we managed to tame, but the reality is much more cooperative. For thousands of years, we carried its seeds across continents, watered its fields, and protected it from pests, all because a few ancient humans sat around a campfire, took a deep breath, and realized the world looked a little bit different through the smoke.